They were casting Lord of the Rings. It was some Hobbit-like character, surely, that I didn't grasp it. I was looking for something else. And I remember see Lord of the Rings in the theater with an ex-girlfriend. She turned to me and she said, "You passed on a chance to be in it." And I remember feeling so stupid. The Pianist. That's luck, where, preparation meets opportunity, where I had been yearning to find character with that depth and a filmmaker with that insight, and he didn't fall into the traps that many filmmakers fall into in telling a story where you have to try and, it had a real slow burn, how these atrocities slowly became accepted in society and how bigotry and hatred can grab hold and how people can just destroy evil and horror within all of that is incomprehensible. And to play a very normal person, who's not particularly heroic.
Don't you have a drop of water? He's dying. My child's dying of thirst. I beg you. Don't you have a drop of water?
A man who was slightly aloof and would never imagine witnessing all that's stripped and losing all that he lost. The responsibility that I felt in carrying that role and the process, and so deep, so profound, that it never left me. And aside from the obvious career benefits and the accolades, it changed my life. As a man, as a young man, I feel like that movie made me understand a lot and made me realize how much I'd taken for granted.
I want to see your identity card!
What's happening?
He's a Jew! A Jew! Stop the Jew!
I, had to lose a lot of weight so that there was a transition from Spielman's lowest point after being in hiding and not eating. So that you can't act emaciated, you have to become emaciated. And that was a technical process that led to a discovery about the hollowness and emptiness that one feels when you are literally deprived of sufficient nutrition. Then the physical metamorphosis affects your self-esteem and your energy levels and your willpower and your strength. I realized I'd never really been hungry. And it still breaks my heart how many people are hungry in this world. And that most people don't understand. We go to dinner and there's all this food left over. It gets thrown out. Massive homeless epidemic. Children on the streets. And so it's all, what it does is it gives you a level of empathy. And then I learned to play Chopin. I don't know how to read piano, but I put my stuff in storage. I moved out of my apartment and I sold my car and I disconnected my cell phone and I did all these crazy things to have a sense of not knowing what I was going to go home to, and just purely focus on that. And then the music, the task of trying to learn Chopin, I found such a wonderful distraction from the hunger. And then so I found this new connection now to the music. This was a practical task to do the research to understand how to portray this man. And I find myself becoming somebody else. The Darjeeling Limited. Let's give Wes some love, because Wes is the first director to embrace some comedic sensibility within me. And I guess I didn't have a lot to show, but partially that is because you're not given the opportunity to show it. And so people are like, well, he's a very serious actor. And I'm like, well, let me loose, and then let's see if we have some fun.
I love the way this country smells. I'll never forget it. It's kind of spicy.
That experience was such a joy. Another life experience. We lived in India together. We all lived in a house together. You know, I'm an only child, but I had these guys, we were like brothers, and I became really close to Owen, and Jason is wonderful, and I bought a Royal Enfield and ride around India and every day, and nobody had a problem with that. It was just such a free experience. And we shot on a moving train, and we'd have no makeup, no wardrobe process. You had your suit hung on your wall with a microphone. They combed our hair, and that was about it. And then we'd have to get on a train 6 in the morning, 5:45, before it left the station, because it was on a route. And we'd basically shoot one way, 5 hours or so, and then shoot on the way back. He's got the code to his ex-girlfriend's answering machine, and he's checking her messages.
What? When did he confide that to you?
Just now.
Why am I not a part of this?
Wes is a very specific filmmaker, you know, but in that film there was a looseness. I guess India inspired some of that in all of us, and maybe within that story a bit more of just giving in, right? But you know, like the glasses were obviously all part of the story and structure and everything, but I thought it was hilarious that I couldn't really see through those glasses, and so every time I'd have to read, I'd have to take the glasses up and off, and so it became a whole thing, and so then I started doing that business, and I was able to control it with my eyebrows so that the glasses could fall when I'm on command, and they became, my father's glasses became such a part of Peter's character, and stuff like that, like let Wes indulge me and let me play around with. But so much is such a vision of what he wants and how we look, how we interact, and timing, and it was great fun, really great fun. Grand Budapest Hotel. I understood Wes more because we had developed a friendship at that point. Jumping in Darjeeling, I didn't really know what I was getting into, and learned on the fly. Now I kind of had a shorthand with Wes, and even more so now. I mean, I kind of know what he's looking for. And I know what battles I can't fight, so I don't fight those battles. So I can go right to what he likes, because I know what he likes. And there's nothing wrong with that.
This man is an intruder in my home.
It's not yours yet, Dimitri. Only when probate is granted and the deed of entitlement is
You're
given.
not getting boy with apple, you goddamn little fruit. Dimitri was such a villain. He was such a jerk, you know, but it was fun to revel in being such a distinctly bad character. Such a fun thing. We shot in Görlitz in Germany, and we'd walk over the border to Poland and have a shot of Polish vodka and walk back, and it was like the whole thing. It was fun. Every experience with Wes seems to feel a bit Wes Anderson. We all lived in this little odd hotel that was lovely, and you'd have these communal dinners, and he creates a wonderful atmosphere. And each time it's just such a pleasure to meet all these wonderful actors. A writer or a friend of somebody's is coming to visit, and they're joining us for dinner. He makes it like a troupe, and you get to know each other, and that's a wonderful thing.
I'm gonna blast your candy ass once and for all right now.
I think Wes just keeps honing in on it, on something that no one does quite as authentically, and it's him. It's visible in every frame. And that's remarkable. That's like a great artist when you say, oh, that's a Basquiat. King Kong. I'll tell you a story I haven't really spoken about. They were casting Lord of the Rings, and I somehow didn't grasp it. Don't remember what part I would have been right for, but it was some Hobbit-like character, surely, that I was looking for something else. And I remember going to see Lord of the Rings in the theater with an ex-girlfriend. She turned to me and she said, "You passed on Lord of the Rings?" I remember feeling so stupid, but I don't think I would have gotten the role of Jack in Peter's movie. I don't think that would have translated. And it was such a wonderful thing. I mean, King Kong is such an amazing, iconic story, and Peter told this so well. I mean, with so much heart. And he's such a brave filmmaker. It's in the subtext.
I guess I must have missed it.
It's not about words.
They wrote that character, which in the original was much more of a simple ship's first mate. He didn't have much, and the dynamic was very different. And he created, he allowed not a tough guy on a ship to go save the girl, and a guy who kind of forced into being present and having to man up. And I thought it was wonderful role, wonderful process. I worked with Andy Serkis and learned so much about green screen and the complexity of acting within that. Naomi was wonderful in the movie, and to be friends with Jack Black. And it was some year because it was a 9-month shoot, and we had a hiatus for 3 months or so where they built Kong Stage, where they had to finish building the sets and an enormous structure. And in that hiatus, I had booked Hollywoodland. So I went with a few-week break into shooting Hollywoodland, also abroad, and then had a couple weeks off and then went back to filming that. And I had worked a year straight on those 2 characters. I don't think I'd ever done that before, and definitely not done a few long films, but 9 months is a lifetime as a character and on location. Yeah, it was special. And then it was at the time, it was, I think, Universal's biggest movie. We had a premiere on Times Square, and they shut down all of Times Square. The mayor was there, introduced us to the city, and there's this epic Times Square sequence in the movie, which, by the way, I've done a fair share of driving in my life, and I had been boasting to Peter that I can drive. And I showed up one day, and he had camera mounted here on both sides of the car, a rear mounted camera and one on the hood, and they had a race engine with a 30s taxi cab. And he said, "You're driving today." And I did all that driving sequence. I came back, and at one moment the door flung open, and I made a turn and the door shut, and there were stuntmen and extras fell down in my path, and I didn't kill anyone, and we were going down narrow alleys with hundreds of thousands of dollars of cameras on the side, and I didn't clip them, and I pulled back up, and the whole crew applauded. And it was just like, it was the best day. It was like so fun, and a lot of that is in the movie. It was a big deal. My face was immortalized on a McDonald's soda cup. I mean, when does that happen for anyone? And it's a heartfelt movie. I mean, it's very moving and tragic. The Village. The role was written someone with more of a mental disability, a learning disability. I did a lot of research. I spent time with this lovely woman who had a facility in Los Angeles and took care of these kids, and I did acting workshops with them, which was amazing. And what I understood and then went back tonight with was that, children and young adults who suffer from some learning disability are so sweet. They haven't become hardened like we have. They don't comprehend it enough. It's just like having a very rational discussion with a child, and they grasp certain things, but certain things are just too far beyond their ability to grasp. And their responses are sometimes magical and odd and off. But this character had a darkness within him. And so then I started exploring other mental conditions that might disturb his thoughts. That process was really interesting. The character had a lot of levity. I liked that, and I loved experimenting.
What if we strike a deal?
Yeah, capital idea.
It would be prudent to keep our deal a secret. Can you do that?
Like a church mouse. We lived in this utopian society. I liked the character. I really liked it. I liked playing him. It was light. Even though he was screwed up, it was nice. It was liberating. Peaky Blinders. I didn't really have a desire to do much television, to be honest. I love film, and they started doing such good television. And it was harder and harder to find really great independent movies because they were doing fewer independent movies. And so the system had changed. It wasn't like I had sought out, I want to find a great television project. And Stephen Knight came to me for that role, which I really appreciate, because that's a character, you know, Luca Changretta was like such a, that's a character I've longed to play. Someone with that kind of flavor. They don't make that many movies like that either, right? I mean, other than Scorsese. That show is something, and it's got something. And so that was very exciting. I could have killed you when I walked through the door. But you see, I want you to be the last. I want you to be alive after your entire family is dead. I had to hold my own with great actors, you know. Cillian Murphy is just wonderful in it. And Helen McCrory was just such a remarkable actress. And Tom Hardy, my first scene was with Tom Hardy. Tom is just fantastic and beloved by the UK and the British crew, and we shot on him, and then I have to hold my own, you know, like, okay, you were pretty good. That was pretty good. I'm watching you. Okay, let my turn, you know. And it was so fun. It was just so fun. And I got to, you know, just play around with a genre that I grew up loving and knowing, and I could be a little playful with it, and yet sinister, and yeah, it was good. Yeah. Succession is such a great show. And Brian Cox is great, and you know, Jesse Armstrong, and these guys, the guys who created this, it's so diabolical and funny, and all that's wrong. What's going on in the fucking world? It's just like, they do it so well. And Adam McKay, and you know, they're great. They know how to do it. They know how to do it, and they were really welcoming to me. That's that, you know, to be so hot and so gracious. They had written an interesting role, and then I said, hey, I love the show. It's my girlfriend's favorite show. You know, we love the show, and she's like, whatever the role is, do it. You know, and I said, I want to do it. I'm not, but we talked through some ideas about what I could be as this guy, and they came back with something that's just spectacular. And they trusted me, and I trusted them, and we showed up with something really fun. And I play a powerful guy who's got a big ego. He puts them to the test a bit, and I feel like they're such sharks, they're such killers, they're so, you know, so to be able to get in there and play, jump in swimming with them and bite back a little, that's what I live for. Love the Hard Way. It's one of my favorite films that I've done. It is a role that I really identified with a lot at that time in my life. It's a tragic movie. And the title says it all. I mean, love is always difficult, but this guy had a lot of issues and was very smart and manipulative, was a con man and a hustler. All of that was to defend his own sensitivity. And like I said, that's not me, but I grew up around a lot of hustling troublemakers, and I had my share, but I was cognizant of my empathy and sensitivity within all the hardness and all my boys and the shit that they get into. I always felt for people in a way that was not considered in a lot when I was young. And I think he has a degree of that, and he doesn't show it. He gets wrapped up with this girl, or rather she gets wrapped up with him, and you know, he just destroys her. And it's really tragic, but it's beautiful, their connection. And he warns her to steer away. And there's this beautiful moment where he's like, do you like movies with the happy endings or the sad ones? What kind of movies do you prefer? The ones with the sad endings or the happy ones?
Sad ones, definitely. Yeah, I like movies that make me cry.
If you like to cry, you're with the right guy. She says, the sad ones. He says, then you're with the right guy. And there are lessons within that, and she doesn't heed that. And, it was special. And Marie Noel, who was his partner, wrote the film, nailed it in such a interesting perspective. It was a very European film about my city and about everything that I knew, and graffiti, and not that it was much, it was just like stylized and yet felt like New York, but with French cinema or something. It just was so classy and unique and distinct. And I had this python jacket, and it was so wild. And it's funny because I ended up, The Pianist came just after that, and it was such a different person and so much more an individual I identified with at 26. The world really was introduced to me as Vladislav Spielman because of the success of that film, and it's a wonderful thing, but it was so strange because that seemed so incongruous to people. And my love of hip-hop, I almost scored that film. I had been sending Peter beats and was doing all this kind of Asian-inspired things, Eastern elements in it. And he ended up finding a producer to do something like that because I ran off and was in Poland learning to play Chopin. Summer of Sam. It was a real iconic New York film. I love Spike's work. I think he's so distinct and unique and has a point of view and a vision, and I was so excited to get that role. I knew very little about punk culture and that music scene. I was really into hip-hop, and I was just like, that was so different from anything that I knew, other than in New York, I went to performing arts. I had a lot of friends who were, I had a diverse group of friends. I hung out in the East Village a lot, and I was living in the East Village when we made the movie, and but it wasn't my scene.
The cracks in the sidewalks of New York City, from the ants that dwell here in these cracks.
It was a really fun time because I had transformed quite a bit and would often walk around. I mean, I did have a bleach blonde mohawk at one point, but I had these Liberty spikes and wearing my chains, and people treated me so differently. People literally moved away from that side of the street and just kind of looked at me. They disapproved, and I further identified with the character, and I further understand that attitude. It didn't occur to me initially how judgmental people are based on how you look. As people responded differently, I caught on to that and played with that a bit more. Also, I learned to play some of the tracks, and I performed in CBGBs. I'm sticking cigarettes in the fret and being spit on by these kids that they pulled off St. Mark's, and I was spitting on them, and it was so raw and alive, loud, unencumbered, and I'd never performed musically, not that I was a musician, but I learned to play a bit. I had a guitar all the time with me. I kind of got into it, and embraced that. It was just really fun. So there was of course the outsider perspective, which I would say is a through line in many of the roles I played. I gravitate to representing the outsider, not just identifying and wanting to portray that, but representing how we feel as individuals within society, and where we fit in and where we don't fit in, and the challenges of not fitting in and being unique, rather than succumbing. The French Dispatch. Wes in The French Dispatch has opened a portal. It's brilliant. It's a whole new level of Wes. It's great. I play an art dealer, and I have a love of art, and I'm a painter, and Benicio del Toro our relationship is so fun. It's so fun. And that segment of it, of how Wes represents the art world, and it's really brilliant. There's so many great actors in this movie, too. I want to buy it.
It's not for sale.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. There's just so many. There's just so much to that movie. Like I can't even get into it. Unfortunately, he and I don't work together. But Tilda Swinton's in the movie. She's amazing. Bill Murray. It's amazing what Wes does. And all these characters are so unique. Each character is so unique. Clean. That movie is, something that I wrote with my director, Paul Solet. It's another side of what our world is like today. And it's a very New York movie. In its essence, it's about redemption and a man who's lived a kind of dark past, who's trying to do right and do good and give back to society. And he's made some big mistakes in his life and trying to make amends. And he's pushed to the limit, but and then ultimately resorts to what he understands and to kind of do right, even though reacts in violence. Now more than ever, people feel a sense of an awareness of a helplessness and an isolation that people have felt. We made this prior to the pandemic. It delves into an opioid crisis conspired by and thrust upon us by a handful of very powerful people. All the oppressive forces that are so hard for young people to escape, live full, meaningful lives without all that darkness. And it's an action thriller genre, but I wanted to create depth and, again, a character that is deeply, deeply flawed. Not a good guy, but I think it's very representative of where we're at. It's something I've longed to do for over a decade. I've really wanted to write a movie that is tailored for all these things that I know how to convey and want to convey. And then I scored the film, which wasn't something I had set out to do initially, but ultimately it was making all these tracks as I made the film, and ended up getting in an orchestra and having French horns playing what I synthesized and, orchestrating amazing piece of music and doing all these original tracks just to kind of tell this story. And so hopefully that'll be at a theater near you or streaming near you or whatever happens in this new world, but it was exciting. Fun to go down memory lane.